All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Warren Wakeman. I'm one of the senior faculty mentors for the Academic Life and Emergency Medicine Faculty Incubator. Super stoked today to be able to spend a little bit of time hanging out with Swami, Anand Swaminathan. He is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at NYU Bellevue. And this guy is just completely awesome. When you think of Swami, you want to think of foam med, you want to think of foam critical care. He's a contributor across the board to like Life in the Fast Lane. He's a course director of the teaching course, editor-in-chief for Core EM, co-host of EM Rap, contributes to Rebel EM. Pretty much if it's online, if it's in the social media realm, Swami's name is there. And so we're super stoked to be able to talk to him a little bit about medical education, technology, a little bit about foam ed, and kind of get the perspective from someone who's been living and breathing it for the past number of years in his career. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great. You know, I want to lead off with two things I think are really important. I don't want to forget them. The first is that I am not by any means a technophile. I didn't have a cell phone in college. I barely use my email. This is all stuff that I've come late in the game to. So for the people who are out there, I know the faculty incubator tends to be people on the younger side, so they're all not going to be intimidated by this. But if you are in any way, shape, or form intimidated by it, trust me, if I can do it, it can't be that hard. The second thing that I just want to make sure everyone is clear on is that all of these things that we're going to talk about today, these are all just other tools to education, right? Education is the bottom line of all of this, and education has to be about you and your learner. I should really reverse those. It has to be about your learner and you, and it's all about using different techniques and different modalities to reach them. So simulation's great. It's not the end all be all. Technology is great. It's not the end all be all. So just remember that this has to fit in with everything else you do. You can't just throw a computer at someone and say, learn. It's got to be more than that.
Great point. I mean, that's a great way to sort of kick this off. So go into your first point. So how did you actually really get into this space? I know we have a lot of younger junior faculty who are starting at the start of their career trying to figure out where to develop themselves professionally. So how did you get involved in this space?
A lot of it was, I would say, a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work, and being in the right place at the right time. So again, this wasn't the way that I thought things were going to go. I was really interested in lecturing, and I started out doing a lot of grand rounds and lecturing. And then as I'm going through it, I'm realizing, podcasts are becoming much bigger. MRAP was already huge when I started as a faculty member, and a lot of what I got to do, I got by reaching out to people. So I reached out to Mel, asked him I wanted to do something, and Mel was like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And it kind of just snowballed from there. So I always tell people that one of the most important things, especially in our field, is to reach out to people that you want to work with and drop them an email and just say, hey, I love the stuff that you're doing. I'd love to contribute. Are you looking for this? Are you looking for that? And with few exceptions, most people are looking for more contributors. It's hard to keep blogs, podcasts, everything moving along without outside help. So most of us are looking for other people to help develop things. So if you are interested, reach out and ask people. The only thing they can say is no. And then for those of you guys who are mentoring others, push them out there, right? So take advantage of the connections that you have, the relationships you've made, and help other people along. I think some of us are more reluctant than others to put ourselves out there, to ask for things that we want. And that's okay, but then we might need a little shove. But if you're willing to be shot down, if you're willing for someone to say, yeah, I'm not really interested right now, then just put yourself out there and ask, and you're going to find that most people are really nice and they really want to get you involved. So for me, it was really all the things kind of coming together in the right, the stars aligning in the right fashion. But I think it starts by you being willing to put yourself out there. And then once somebody asks you to do something or they agree to something that you want to do, you got to deliver. You have to deliver. And what I usually tell people is you want to deliver, and you want to deliver ahead of schedule. So I'll tell them, oh, it's going to take me like 3 weeks to finish that, and I'll try to deliver within 2 weeks. That's my goal that I set for myself. And if you do that, if you deliver on time or ahead of time, you deliver something good, you meet the specifications of the thing that the person wanted, they will come back to you again because you're reliable now. Reliability in our business is so important because we have so many balls in the air. But if I know, if I ask Warren something, it'll be done. It'll be done on time. So go back to the well, ask him again. That's how you get to do the second time around, right? The first time is you reaching out. The second time around is how well did you deliver on that first one?
Wow, great feedback. We could probably just stop there and we'll be ahead of the game. So.
I think that's not a bad idea because I don't have anything else to offer.
No, I mean that's great advice, especially for junior faculty. I mean, getting yourself out there, not being afraid to make that ask. And it's funny. I mean, for a specialty like us, where we're professionally we have to be very extroverted. It's still hard, I think, for a lot of people to make that leap when it comes to their own personal career. We have no problem walking into a room and taking charge, but when it comes to kind of a cold email or reaching out to someone to say, hey, can I get involved? There's a lot of people that are a little hesitant to do so. So it's a great point.
That's because when we were kids, when we were kids, we were all nerds, and we were always like the last pick for dodgeball, the last pick for whatever sport. I'm not trying to get my soul out here, but I think that we, because of that, because of where we existed as people for a long time, I think we are a little reluctant. But remember, everybody else that's doing this stuff, they're also nerds, they're also geeks, and they're really excited to talk to you and find out what you're passionate about.
I'm just impressed you actually got picked for dodgeball. I never got picked. So, so that's great. So when you started you got involved in EMRAP a little bit. So how did you make that leap from sort of being a contributor in one area to sort of building your own brand with Core EM and going that route?
Yeah, that took a long time in between. And a lot of it in the beginning was I'm going to contribute to other people's blogs. So I did some stuff for Michelle on Academic Life. I just started to do some stuff with Salim on Rebel, with EM Docs. And it was a nice way to kind of just feel it out. Is this something that I want to do? Writing blog posts, creating stuff. Is that something that I like doing? And I did. I enjoyed doing it. And so after doing it for a while for other people, then that was when I took the leap and said, I'm going to make something that is a little bit of more of my own, that I really have a bit more ownership and guidance over. So a lot of people don't do it that way. A lot of people start with their own thing and build it. And I think that's fine too. But for me, that task seemed very overwhelming from a technological standpoint. Understanding how to make a blog and things like that were not something that I ever knew how to do. And be honest, I still don't really know. If I had to build a blog from the ground up, I'm not sure that I could do it. So I kind of got the experience letting other people run the stuff and contributing. And I really liked doing that part. And so I got more involved and finally decided to do my own. And I'll tell you that, Core EM, it's not my site. I am the editor-in-chief. I helped create it, but it is our site at NYU. It's driven by the residents with me kind of helping them through stuff. But I got a grant from the department to build that. And that's something important too. We have to start recognizing how important free open access medical education is, how important your presence online is, not just to you, but also to your institution. So your institution is starting to understand this process. And there are leaders, people like Daniel Cabrera out of the Mayo Clinic are really the leaders on how we use this information for professional development, how important this should be to a university and an institution. And so when I asked for the money, I was pretty sure they were going to say no. But I put together a business proposal. I gave it to my chair and I said, this is what I think I need to make this happen. This is why I think it's important. And they gave me money to do it. And so I was then able to pay somebody to develop a website. I'm still able to pay somebody for the work that they do to keep the website looking nice. So the bottom line is get involved first. So ask people. I know at Rebel EM, we're always looking for contributors. We're always open. I know EM Docs is usually looking for new people to contribute, but get out there, try it out. If you like it, fantastic. Keep contributing. And then if you decide, I want to have my own platform, now you've got some experience and some background to do that. If you're like, what, I like writing, I like getting myself out there, but I don't want to have my own site, fantastic. We all need good people to contribute. So I think that that's a nice way to get started and then see whether it's something you really want to pursue or not.
That's a great point. So one thing you mentioned I thought was really interesting, that you went to your department, you kind of put something together, and you had a lot of great support from your department. The thing I always hear a lot, especially when it comes up with either new initiatives or new ideas, is, well, why do we need to do this? And I'm sure a lot of our faculty in the group are going to get that initial resistance of why is this important? Why foam ed? Can you sort of give me your take, or if you have a sort of a canned response when someone says, I don't know what this foam ed thing is. Why do we need to put X amount of dollars in it? Or why do we need to put this much time into it? And these are typically, the older, more established chairs that didn't grow up having this kind of exposure. So how do you sort of address that initial skepticism?
Well, there's more and more in our literature and in other journals that are looking at this phenomena. And I think that's one place you can start. You can show them articles from Annals. You can show them articles from Journal of Graduate Medical Education talking about this. You can give them sort of the more or the less literature-based appeal, which is, there's lots of people who are out there that are on this. And when they are out there, they're not just touting themselves. They're not just touting their website. They're touting their institution. They're representing their place of work. And so it's important as an institution for us to be out there. If it's not going to be us, it's going to be somebody else that's out there doing it. And why shouldn't we have a voice here? So I think you can use all of these different appeals. You probably have to use all of them depending on where your chair is in this process. But I'll tell you, I know the chair, my prior chair, other chairs that I've met with, many of these people are very forward thinkers. They may not completely understand the concept, but they don't always need to fully understand the concept to get behind it. So I think you have to present it in the light of, this is a way that I'm going to develop myself. This is a way that I can advertise for our institution and get ourselves out there. And I think those things do have value. The other way, if you have someone who really needs hard numbers, you can ask people who run blogs to give you numbers, right? How many downloads of a podcast? How many page hits do you get? And those numbers mean something. We look at impact factors, right? Why should I publish in a journal? Well, the journal's read by X number of people and it's got this impact factor. You do the same thing for social media. Why should I support you doing this? Well, if you look at some of the big blogs that are out there, you have people like Weingart, who's got 80, 90, 100,000 downloads on the podcast. EM Cases up in Canada, 50, 60, 70,000 downloads per podcast. These are big numbers. And some chairs and some departments, some universities like numbers. They like having metrics. So give them metrics. Show them, like write a blog post for Michelle, write a blog post for me, and then ask, hey, can you give me the page hits on that? Can you tell me how many people looked at that? And I'll tell you, Warren, I have written articles for regular journals, and they're read by like my mom, my dad, and like 3 other people. Nobody else reads that stuff. So this is very different. We reach a huge number of people with this platform, and you can show that. And then you can also show, forget about our local area, forget about national. There's international following here. Steve Carroll, who runs EM Basic, he talks about this all the time. When he went to his department about what he was doing, he's like, my podcast is downloaded on every continent in the world. He'll show me how many, and Steve would never say it this way because he's a nicer guy than I am, but show me how many of the faculty in your department are known on every continent in the world. There very few people have that kind of a presence, but this podcast can reach everybody. The blog can reach everybody. And if we are saying that we are a university, if we are a university medical system or a university hospital, we want to have this reputation, this is one part of that.
No, I mean, it's absolutely true. I think in emergency medicine, we're definitely fortunate to have a lot more forward-thinking chairs. Being a specialty that's really pushing foam in general, I think it's very helpful to us. I definitely see it more in the traditional medical education world, in the medical schools where, you have a lot of PhDs, you have a lot of basic scientists that really have no concept of this being out there, and they're very numbers heavy. So it's great that there's a lot of work and a lot of publications being put out there in that more sort of traditional medium that gets a lot of the more traditional faculty aware of what we're doing, and it sort of speaks their language.
Absolutely.
To what you need to be able to do. So with your role as an educator, you brought this up with the technology earlier, that really the core of this is the fact that you're an educator. So you do a lot of work with residents, you do a lot of work on foam, but then you also do a lot of work educating other faculty or instructors through some of your work in the teaching course. Do you find any big differences between teaching residents and teaching faculty? Any different challenges in both of those areas, or are they the kind of the same pool that you can work through?
Yeah, I mean, there's technology challenges between different generations. And remember, faculty groups range from everyone who's a year out of residency to 30 years out of residency. And those are going to be very different of what you can give people, what you can approach them with. Again, we're lucky in emergency medicine. We tend to have people who understand that all these things are dynamic. They're embracing of it. Up until a couple of years ago, we did have a couple of faculty members in my department who didn't have cell phones, but it wasn't because they didn't understand the technology. It's because they just didn't want to be reached all the time. But in general, we have people who are savvy on this stuff. So that makes it beneficial. And what we're talking about when we're talking about education most of the time is consumption and using it to support teaching. And I think those are things that we can do. I tend, in the people who are more reluctant, and again, that doesn't necessarily based on age. I've had people who are a year or two out of residency who are very reluctant to embrace free open access medical education and technological advances for education. The people who are more reluctant, I start them out very small. Very, very small. Here's 2 blogs: Life in the Fast Lane, Academic Life in Emergency Medicine. Check those out. See what you like, what you don't like. And I start them on these little things. And many of them start to gain interest and they're like, oh, this is really cool. And then you're like, well, check this podcast out. Check this other website out. And all of a sudden they start branching out. Some people read it and they're like, you know what? I'm fine with just this or none of it. And sometimes they're not ready for that change. And so you have to wait and approach again. The people who are more open to it, those are the people that you really embrace and you give them tools, but you also try not to overwhelm them as well. So even with that group, I often will start off with just, here's a couple of great blogs and great podcasts that can supplement your learning, but then you can also use those, turn around and use those for your teaching, for teaching others. And so I start them off small and then let them kind of find their way through this stuff as well. And I think that you do need to let people find their way through it, but start them off with a couple of resources that they can use and show them how it can be really beneficial, how it can augment their teaching and how it can build what they're doing.
Great approach. I mean, yeah, I think, when you think about starting small, getting that small little piece of buy-in, and you're right, when the faculty aren't, like the cell phone example you gave, we do have a lot of faculty that just, they don't want the extra noise or the extra exposure or data coming in. And that's, I think, a perfectly fine reason to not be in that space, but showing them kind of where a little bit of utility can help them, of having a little bit more content or a little bit more defined role. So that brings up sort of another question, is foam or is the technology sort of right for every learner, or are there some learners that just you don't attempt to even approach in this space? How do you approach that? The sort of the resistant learner to what you're doing.
Yeah, that's tricky. So again, I think that this is not a full embracing where all of your education is going to come from this stuff. So I think that there is definitely a role for everyone to be tapped into this in some way, shape, or form. Just like I think that everybody should be tapped into journals, everybody should be tapped into conferences, everybody should read a textbook, right? I believe that all of these are modalities for our education. So yes, I think everybody should be involved. And I think that you started off in residency level where it is part of their education. For us, we use a lot of these resources for flipped classroom education. Instead of me creating something for them to read, I can find good, high quality resources that are out there to supplement their education. So I start them early on seeing this stuff. And the truth is, our residents, they're already doing this for their learning. They may not be doing medicine, but they're already reading blogs. They're already listening to podcasts. So it's easy to say, hey, here's another blog, another podcast that you should listen to, but this one's going to be for your professional development, your professional education. So starting small, but I think everybody should be involved to some degree, just like I think everybody should read a journal and everybody should go to a lecture and everyone should go to a conference.
Yeah, I agree. Preaching to the choir on that one. So you mentioned, flipped classroom and sort of eliminating the need for everyone to make their own sort of brand of content, right? There's some really amazing content out there, and it's sort of silly when you think about everyone making the same lecture when there's some people that are doing it really well. With this whole growing popularity of flipped classroom, content creation, asynchronous learning, now the University of Vermont Medical School is going to go to completely lectureless curriculum, I think, by 2020. The question I hear a lot is, is the lecture dead? I'd like to get your take on that.
So I don't think so. I don't think the lecture is dead. And I'm not just saying that because I like to give lectures, and I do a lot of lectures a year. But I don't think it's dead. I think that it needs to change, and we need to be more receptive of how to do it better. The old style of lecture, the style that we grew up with, the style that we had in college, that is it's not dead because it's going to keep happening, but it is not the optimal way to learn. So I think for those of us that are lecturing, for those of us who are educating on those bases, I think lectures can still be fantastic if the person lecturing understands the way people learn. I think that one of the fundamental shifts in my mind, and one of the fundamental shifts that many people have seen over the last 10 years, is a focus off of the educator and onto the learner. We should stop saying, what does the educator want to do? And start asking, what does the learner want from me? And how can I meet them there? So lectures are great to deliver information to a large group of people. Podcasts are better because I can get podcasts to more people, no matter what anybody says. The largest room you've ever been in for a lecture pales in comparison to the largest volume of people who digest a podcast. So the podcast is definitely a superior form for many reasons, including the fact that you can rewind it, you can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can do it on your time, all of those things. But the lecture is still an important quality to have, and it's an important teaching tool to be good at. And the reason is because we're going to still have lectures and things like that, but a lecture should in essence be an argument. It should be an argument for me telling you to do something differently than the way you're doing it now. If I have a talk I love giving on acute pulmonary edema. If everybody managed acute pulmonary edema the way that I think they should be doing it, then there's no reason for me to lecture on it anymore. So that lecture is an argument. And so it's a matter of, how do I do that argument best? We will always need to debate and argue. And a lecture is a good way of learning how to do that, of organizing your thoughts, of organizing the information, of doing the work and the research put into it. And so a good lecture is still incredibly valuable and can be repurposed for a podcast, etc. A bad lecture, yeah, they should be dead. They're not, because you saw one. You saw one recently, I'm sure. Within the last month, you've seen a bad lecture. I've seen a bad lecture within the last week. They're there, but I think that as a group, we are striving to do something better. And I think we're getting closer. I think we're getting closer to giving great talks every time. But we still have a long way to go. So I don't think the lecture is dead. I think bad lectures should be dead, and we should be striving to give good lectures.
Great point. Yeah, I'm similar camp, because it's very hard, I think, to get away from it completely. But you said something I thought was really poignant, where the lecturer really needs to understand how to educate, and how people learn, which I think is a sort of a shortcoming if you look at medical education as a whole, that many of us aren't inherently trained or have received any sort of special attention to focus on education. And so I think that's a big shift that we're seeing in general. We're seeing a lot more education fellowships not just show up in emergency medicine, but in other specialties as well. And we're starting to see a lot more master's programs develop, and similar online certificates for people that don't want to go back through a master's. So I think now there is that focus on education, which I think is going to help, address the problem. But we're still kind of relatively short in numbers. There's probably the minority of individuals that are just phenomenal educators, and there's still the others, the larger cohort that needs to get a little bit better, but may not be aware that they need to get better. So
yeah, and that's a tough thing to overcome. If the person doesn't have the insight to know that they can be better, how do you bridge that gap? And I don't have a good answer for that. A lot of times the person has to realize it on their own, that their teaching technique is falling short somehow. It's hard to go up to somebody and be like, hey, listen, I know you've been doing this for 30 years, but you suck at it. I think we need to take advantage of those opportunities when they come up. I mean, how many times, if you think about it, someone came up to you and said, I don't really think the residents learned a single thing that I said. I don't think, like, how come only 10 people showed up today for my talk? And usually we'll just be like, oh, it's a rough day. It's been a rough week, blah, blah. There was, it was this person's birthday, whatever it was. You're probably just a little off today. But those are opportunities for us to take advantage and say, well, why do you think only 10 people showed up? Or like, what happened last time? Was the room full last time? In which case, this is just a freak occurrence. Hard conversations to have. Expert educators can do it. I will tell you as soon as I become comfortable with that conversation. But I do think it's important to take advantage of the situation and say, you got feedback on the lecture. Here's the feedback you got. What do you think about it? How do you think you can improve? And then give ideas on how to improve.
Right. It's a great point. I mean, a lot of places have faculty development courses and those sort of things. And, even you with the Teaching Institute, but I'm sure the people that run through there are the ones that have that insight and say, I want to get better. I want to spend the extra 2 or 3 days to do this. We don't have an answer at our institution for the other ones, but like I said,
Yeah,
what do you
and one of the nice things too is giving examples. So, if you
Right.
get to go to one of these courses or you get to run one of these courses, you can give examples of people who are widely considered as master educators, but they are still showing up to the Teaching Institute. They're still showing up to these courses to advance their skills. A couple of years ago, maybe it was last year at the teaching course, Rich Hamilton was there. And, Rich is, a real scion in emergency medicine. He's extremely well known, a brilliant educator. But I asked him, I'm like, why are you here? He goes, are you kidding me? Anything I can do to improve. And I think that's the mentality. I mean, you look at that and I'm like, wow, this is exactly who I want to be when I have more experience as an emergency doc, is still saying, there's so much more I can learn and so much more I can be better. And so I give that example to senior faculty all the time. And I'm like, listen, if it's good enough for Rich, it's good enough for you. Right. And I think people like that. People like hearing about their contemporaries or people who are well established still making these efforts to be great at what they do.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Looks like we're coming up near 30 minutes, so we'll sort of shift focus a little bit and just talk a little bit about a couple other items. This has been a great discussion so far. So we hit on it a little bit, as far as how to get faculty or how to get leadership, on board with what you're doing in the foam space and in those areas. In the world of traditional academic promotions, which I know a lot of institutions are still very traditional in that format, how do you balance, traditional academic activities like the standard research components with all of the innovative teaching? Does your institution put a lot of value on foam and social work, or was that always the case, or was that work in progress still? How does that set for your progression as a professor going up the ranks?
Yeah, this is a tough thing. I think, one of the things you have to do up front is decide what is important to me as an academic, as an educator. What are my goals? And if promotion and tenure are really, really important goals for you, then this might not be the best way to go about getting that done. That's the honest truth, is that nobody really knows how this is going to be looked at. And each university is different. Each place is different on what they're going to promote based on. So we know that there are some people within this realm who have been promoted on what they do in terms of their blogging and podcasting, et cetera. Michelle Lynn obviously being one of those people. But it's a small group. It's a small group that has that experience. And we also have to remember that people like Michelle had other experiences before this. They had other things on their CV that they could put forward that were more traditional ways to get promoted. So yes, those are our forefathers and mothers who are leading the way in this. And the rest of us don't really know. So I'm up for promotion now, and I've put through based on all of this work that I've done, and we'll see how it turns out. We don't know the answer to that. For me, promotion and tenure are not my primary concerns. It doesn't matter to me what my title is. It doesn't matter if I'm assistant or associate. Those things are irrelevant. And knowing that for yourself is important. I'm not telling everybody who listens to this to say, don't worry about promotion and tenure. But if you know for yourself that that's not an important piece of what you're doing, then it's actually very liberating for then you to say, I'm only going to do things that I enjoy doing. That doesn't mean you can't be an educator. It doesn't mean you can't be an APD. Like, yes, there are things that you have to do in those roles that you may not love. That might be the means to the end. But if certain things like promotion are not important to you, then pick and choose projects that are important to you, that they're enjoyable. They're things that you want to do, and you'll be successful. At some point, these things will gain more credence. That's the way things are moving. And again, Daniel Cabrera and his group over at Mayo are leading the charge on this. They've got some publications out there on how this shouldn't just be a piece of your promotion. Everybody should be involved in this stuff. Everybody should have a presence online. And as places like Mayo embrace that, it'll filter down to the rest of us. So, my answer for that is really determine what's important for you. And if you decide promotion and tenure is important for you, then you really have to think about, how do I turn these non-traditional, innovative types of education into something that is traditional? So if you've done something innovative, publish it in a journal, write it up, get it published, get an abstract submitted somewhere, do all of those things. if that process isn't important to you, then that's okay too. But find ways to take the things that you've done, the things that you've learned, the things that you've built, and get them to the other folks who are educating, so the rest of us can take advantage of them too. And then that will also be powerful in your promotion to say, I created this, I shared it with friends through Academic Life in EM or through another blog. And now, it's being done at 15 institutions across the country. It's being done at 20 institutions across the country. Those are important things. But again, it's about your priorities. It's about what's important to you.
Right. Well, I think this is probably going to be a very obvious question, right? But would you say, from kind of looking at the trajectory of your career and the things that you've done, would you say that most of your opportunities that have come up have been from the more traditional work, or a lot of the work that you've done in foam? I mean, almost a rhetorical question, but
yeah, it's definitely mostly from foam. And the networks, the opportunities, I hate the word network, but it is your friends, this personal system that you create of the people around you that you go back to do project after project after project because they're fun and enjoyable. I don't even consider them work anymore because I'm hanging out with people that I like to hang out with. I mean, before we got on here, I did an hour and 15-minute long recording with Salim Rizai. That wasn't work. That was fun. It just happens that we're going to produce a couple of podcasts out of it too, but that was fun. And so I have found that to be much more rewarding, much more sustaining. And Warren, I think that's a lot about what this is about. We talk about burnout and people not wanting to do their job anymore. And I think a lot of that is not having something to be passionate about outside of that clinical work. Obviously, everybody on the faculty incubator here, these are all people who want to be involved in teaching and academics, and they're really passionate about that stuff. Keep that passion going. Don't let it burn out, and don't let it become something that's institutionalized, that I have to be academic and I have to produce this in order to get promoted, because then even if the stuff is enjoyable, you'll burn out. Make it about what's enjoyable. If it's enjoyable to you, your residents will love it. Your learners will love it. But it's got to be something that you love doing, that you're passionate about, that you don't feel is work, if you can find that. I don't know. These are all tough concepts, and I'm not saying that they're easy. I'm now 9 years out of residency, and I did a lot of things that I didn't love doing, but I had to do those things to find what I actually did love. So, don't take any of these things as failures. You try something out, not really my thing, great, but you learned a lot of lessons from it. It's not wasted time. It all goes towards finding that thing that really is enjoyable for you and keeps your career going. So, I don't even know where the question started, Warren, anymore. We've really diverted off. But the point for me is, find things that you like doing. And if you do that, you will be successful.
Right. I mean, that's almost the best way to end this little discussion here. I mean, focusing on wellness, focusing on your own personal satisfaction, the sort of the rat race that can be considered promotions and tenures, a big portion of that is, your presence, whether it's international, national, and if you can have fun, hanging out with people that are like-minded and doing a lot of similar things, you'll build that reputation. You'll build these big professional, networks, as you said, and that'll bring a lot of opportunities, which it definitely has done so in your case. But a sort of sage advice there, I think that we could probably end on that good wellness note.
Before I say something stupid, that's a good idea.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your time, Swami. I'm sure the faculty in the group are really going to appreciate hearing your perspective, kind of your journey, your thoughts on flipped classroom and foam and how it relates. So definitely thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me. And, for anyone who watches this later and gets in on, if you have other questions, feel free to tweet at me or email me, and I'm happy to answer that stuff. But find out what you're passionate about. If it involves technology, don't be afraid of it. Find people that know it better than you do to learn off of, and just enjoy yourself. There's a lot of fun things to do out there in education.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Warren and Swami kind of talking a little about technology for the Academic Life and Emergency Medicine Faculty Incubator. Thank you, everyone.